Modern.
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 We're prepping for a voyage.
Modern.
The force of an old-fashioned equals whiskey mass times bitters acceleration.
Why don't you make that a double?
Modern bar cart.
What's shaking, cocktail fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Modern Bar Cart Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Kozlik, and I've got a hell of an interview for you today. Just an awesome conversation with a really good friend of mine, Carlie Steiner, who is doing some really exciting things here in the DC cocktail and restaurant scene. Now, Carlie is not new to the podcast circuit. In fact, she's got another really awesome interview with Alex Luboff and Jordan Wicker, my DC neighbors who run the Speaking Easy podcast. So if you enjoyed this episode, and I'm certain that you will, feel free to head on over there and check out their interview with Carlie as well. But before we jump in here, as always, I want to give you a chance to make yourself a drink. That's right. Today's featured cocktail is, well, actually it's not a cocktail at all, but rather a cocktail ingredient. And this particular spirit is called Signani. And it's a really interesting type of Bolivian brandy that Carlie and I speak about during the lightning round. And I didn't know a whole lot about it then, so I figured I'd come back home, do a little Googling, see what I could find out. So I'm going to share that with you right now. According to the Virginia Alcoholic Beverage Commission, of all places, Signani has quietly been distilled in Bolivia for nearly 500 years in the high elevation 6,000 plus foot valleys of the Andes Mountains. The production is strictly controlled and adheres to traditions established by Jesuit priests. Signani is crafted from the floral Muscat of Alexandria grape, which takes on a complex and aromatic flavor at these altitudes, thus distinguishing Signani from Pisco, Grappa, or other unaged grape-based spirits. I'll take a second here just to comment that this is a type of brandy. So it's as mentioned here, the Muscat of Alexandria grape is the base, and this brandy is then fermented and consequently distilled in kind of the style of an eau de vie, or kind of a slightly harsh, but also, when done correctly, very fragrant and interesting distilled spirits that can be enjoyed in a lot of parts of the world unaged. So if you do see Signani, specifically Ruggiero Signani, which is Carlie's favorite brand of the eau de vie, on the shelves at your local liquor store, then I do recommend that you try it out because she speaks very highly of it. Personally, I have not tried it, or not knowingly or recently, so definitely something I'm going to check out on my own very soon. Now, I want to take a second just to explain what's going on with Carlie's latest project, Himitsu. She gives a pretty good overview of what it's like to go to Himitsu, but doesn't really focus on any of the awards or recognitions that they've gotten. For example, Himitsu has just been named one of the 50 best new restaurants in the United States by Bon Appetit magazine, which I'm sure you've seen, very popular. And I'm going to read a small overview that was published in the Washingtonian here a little while ago. And I'm going to just focus on the part that highlights the cocktails. It says, Steiner co-founded Stir Bartending Company, a cocktail consulting company, so naturally her libations star. At Himitsu, she designed creations to be paired with the whole meal. Diners can try multiple drinks thanks to low-alcohol creations like a mix of sake, smoked green tea, pineapple vinegar, and shiso. That sounds delicious. The beverage list runs long and eclectic with a bounty of sherry, Italian Amaro, Japanese beer, classic cocktails, and Steiner's own innovations. Drinkers can linger after dinner hours and try options like the Nickelback Pickleback, which is whiskey, house-made pickles, and their juice, that are more suited to late-night imbibing. Some of the things that we discuss in this episode include Carlie's journey from under-the-table restaurant worker as a kid to award-winning restaurateur in her 20s. Very young for that, by the way. The most noteworthy cocktails and service experiences she recalls along that journey. A snapshot, of course, of her newest project, Himitsu. the value of travel and openness in cocktail learning, the correct dilution percentages of an old-fashioned and a Manhattan, what to drink at a piano bar with Edith Piaf, and much, much more. I hope that you as a listener can kind of identify some of the passion and just the joy and spontaneity of this conversation, because it was really one of those amazing interviews where things are just clicking, we're improvising, we're not just, reading questions off a list and doing a question and answer thing. It's really a conversation about some of the really important values of cocktails and bartending. So I'm going to step out of the way now and just let you soak in this really awesome conversation with Carlie Steiner. Hey everybody, I am sitting here with Carlie Steiner of Himitsu. Carlie, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I've had a lot of respect for the stuff you've been doing for a long time now. So why don't you give our listeners just a taste of what you're up to now and maybe some of your projects in the past couple of years?
Yeah, of course. So my background is actually in culinary arts. I started really young. In the kitchen, I always guess I was doing both front of house and back of house, but I would say I probably got into it when I was 12 or 13 years old, and I was working for my mom's friend's restaurant, slightly illegally and under the table, of course, as we all do as children. And but I really fell in love with it. I think when I was 15, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life, and I was like, I thought I knew. I wanted to be a cook. I wanted to cook for the rest of my life, and I did that. I kept cooking. I went to culinary school at the CIA up in New York. I got my associates and my bachelor's there in culinary arts management. And the day that I graduated, I got a job as a bartender.
Nice.
So, I made that switch really fast out of culinary school, I suppose.
Where was that first job?
The first job I got was at Minibar and Bar Mini by Jose Andres, and pretty killer first job. Yeah. I know, no doubt. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity. And I still sometimes look back and question if it was real or not. And just really, really grateful. So that absolutely set the trajectory.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
the right
sure.
word? Yeah. We're going to go for it.
I'm not a mathematician.
For the years to come after that. And I just think that it was such an odd decision that I made to apply for that job. And I remember thinking, not taking it seriously when I applied for it. I remember thinking, I'm going to do this. This is a joke, but why not?
Yeah.
And I remember when the first email came back, and that's when I immediately switched my thought process into taking it incredibly and very seriously. And
yeah, I like sometimes when some of the best or most important decisions come out of like absurd premises.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So for a little context for listeners, Bar Mini Bar by Jose Andres, very prominent, very innovative program, part of that celebrity chef's Think Food group. And the bar has done a lot of pioneering work, some molecular gastronomical type of focuses occasionally, right?
I would call it slightly avant-garde for sure. They do both. So and that's what I liked, is that you were able to express creativity there in a way that a lot of other places would not allow, because of the extra things that we were able to have being connected to Minibar. But we were always based in classic cocktail theory. We were always based in formatting our cocktails in a classic way. And so, they were all, in the end, variations of old fashions, Manhattans, martinis, Negronis, sours, highballs, bucks, mules, etc. So it was cool. And the people that I was able to work, the staff that they brought in right after me was a huge part of why I bartend and how I bartend. I learned everything from them,
Great. Yeah. Were there any, I didn't realize coming into this that Jose Andres would be kind of even a figure in this particular narrative, but besides maybe his just presence and overall influence on the program that you were in, are there any other mentors who helped you fall in love with cocktails? Because, and obviously there's culinary school where you get a love for food, the preparation of raw ingredients, the industry. But what about cocktails specifically?
I mean, I think that like the people that I was working with, like I said, were all in a way mentors and led me to researching Sasha Petrasky and his methods of and how what he did for our scene and how he took everything and put it into a format that we can actually follow and learn and educate others with. So with cocktails specifically, I would say those were the people. I've always looked up to, there's just been people, I feel like I've been so lucky in DC to find all these really strong females who business owners that I can look up to and say, oh, that's what I would like to achieve. I would like to be that person, or, have traits of that person, which was such a huge part of leading into Himitsu, right? There was a lot that I learned from other people that I said, I want to do this and I want to take that and I want to build these particular infrastructures and be this type of way and connect to the community because of this. And so I've had tons of mentors.
Yeah.
Like I think everybody is a mentor in some way. You can learn something from everybody. So for
sure. And it seems like, at least when I was first starting to get into cocktails a couple of years ago, you definitely, kind of filled that role for me, at least situationally when we ended up kind of working together. I remember the first time that I ever got behind a bar in a quasi-professional capacity. I wasn't even getting paid for it. I just kind of wanted to learn more, and you were nice enough to let me get behind there. It was I don't know if you remember, it was an event at Maquetto.
I do remember that, yeah.
We were doing I don't remember the chefs. Was it chef driven or I don't even remember.
I want to say it was part of the Sherry pop-ups.
Yes, yeah. That's what it was. And I remember you showed up, you had some sort of CO2 compressor, and I got there and you were shoving lemongrass into a CO2 compressor.
Like, what is she doing? I know exactly what I was doing. I was just infusing it actually, because so you can do it to create something with aeration or bubbles, but you can also just it's like a really fast way to infuse something.
Right.
It just pressurizes it, and then you can strain it right back out, and it's the same thing as letting something sit for 4 hours. It's kind of cool. So
right, yeah, definitely one of those things. One of those nice little tricks you pick up at culinary school for sure.
Right, yeah, no, that was definitely more probably learned at the mini bar or in culinary school.
But getting back to I showed up at this really nice restaurant here on H Street in DC called Maquetto, and Carlie was nice enough to just let me go behind this bar, not really knowing my background, knowing that I had an interest in cocktails and that I had this little bitters company. And I remember one of my first learning experiences was when you came up to me and you were watching me make a few drinks or like practice the drinks for the night, or maybe it was the first drink I made for a patron, and you said, hey, can I give you some feedback? And the thing that I appreciate most about that was that you asked, which is something that until that point I didn't even consider, because usually when you get feedback, it's just sort of like thrown at you and you don't get the option for it. But I remember that the specific feedback you gave me was that when you're pouring the liquor into the measuring apparatus, the jigger or whatever it is, that you should kind of breathe out as you're pouring. And I've taken that with me ever since. That's awesome. I'm so glad. It's so true too. And now it's funny, I do it literally without thinking, and I have to now think, this is so important that I keep, so I don't really get behind the bar anymore, which is horrifying and sad, but I go once a month at least, if not more. I do get behind my own bar just to make sure all the systems are working and things that I'm telling my bartender to do, right? I want to make sure that it's the right thing to do, and it's very hard to just sit back and not and forget all these things. I don't think I think about that anymore, so it's a really good reminder. That happens a lot to me. One of the things that I always like to say is, like, particularly when making an old fashioned or a Manhattan or a Negroni or any of those classic boozy stirred cocktails, it's almost like now I black out for 30 seconds, and then when I look down, the drink's ready. There's a drink there. And I don't even think about how much I struggled initially to figure out how to stir a drink and how to do it properly, and even how to hold the spoon. And I think I do it completely different than most people should, but it works for me because I have big hands. I don't really think there's a right or wrong way, as long as the dilution and chill factor are appropriate. Yeah. Yeah, so I agree. I think it's really interesting when that happens, and I think it's fun to look back as somebody who's been practicing for a few years and appreciate that. And I hope that some of the people who are listening to this podcast and trying to learn a few things from it can have that opportunity in a few months to step back and say, wow, I couldn't do this a few months. So I think that's what our podcast is about. But are there any specific cocktail instances where there was just a particularly memorable drink or a particularly memorable service experience where it made you kind of step back and say, wow, this was really above and beyond. What can I take from this?
Yes, I think, and it's always hard when you're put on the spot with retrieving one particular memory, right? There's been a few that I can remember. So I know that I know the places that I will go and have a perfect cocktail in DC, right? And for me, one of those places has always been Copycat since it opened. And I had the pleasure of working with him, at Mini Bar and Bar Mini. So I feel like he was definitely one of those mentors for me, Devin.
Devin?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But what I was amazed at there is that they're doing these incredibly perfectly executed cocktails that are diluted and chilled appropriately and balanced and taste perfect and measured every single time in an incredibly high speed, well, considerably when you look at other cocktail bars, right? Format and the way that watching them bartend for me is so fun. Just their execution, the process behind the bar that happens that people who are not in the industry would not notice. Like, you wouldn't notice that. You would just say, like, wow, that was a great drink. But I look there and I'm just like, oh my God, they're doing so many things that nobody realizes. And I probably look at that differently now as a business owner. Yeah, I'm looking more at these like systematic approaches, I think, now, and which is good, but maybe I think I just appreciate the drink more now, right? That's sitting in front of me. Right. And a little bit less of making sure, like, watching them stir and do they have proper technique. And I think now I've changed so much with everything. And I think that service now has become so much more important to me than it was even in my mini bar and Bar Mini days, which of course we provided, I think, excellent service, but I feel it more. I feel like I want to have this positive energy and these like good vibes every day and put that out. And the drink has to be, right, like we were saying, measured, perfectly diluted, chilled, everything. But if it doesn't come with good service now, I notice that more. And that's why I think, one of my most memorable experiences recently has probably been Masseria. And I think Julian does incredible cocktails over there. They're thought-provoking and like erotic and just wonderful, and everything. It just makes you warm inside to drink one of them. They're so beautiful and perfectly executed. But the service there that came with it, I was like, wow. Like, this is what that's aspirational. Like, that's something that I can take, and try to teach my staff and try to pass that along.
I want to make a few just comments on what you've said so far. Copycat, for sure, is definitely one of my favorite places to drink, especially because I live fairly close to there. And I agree that when you go up there, you walk up this little set of stairs and you come into a fairly cozy bar. It's in a fairly narrow space.
Absolutely, yeah.
They do a good job of maximizing the space and keeping it cozy while trying to get in the most people you can get in there. And occasionally, if you go there when it's busy, there's going to be 3 people deep at that bar, and for good reason. And when you see the bartenders there start to make a drink, they balance the technique, I think, also with showmanship, because part of it is just each bartender has their own kind of unique flair. There's this one guy who's like 6.5 feet tall, really long arms, and when he gets shaking with both arms, it's just like it's a really cool acrobatic thing to watch because he just shakes the hell out of those cocktails. And for some people, it's the stirring with 2 hands and timing each correctly. And so I think there's an aspect of the execution that is just plain fun to watch, regardless of whether you know what's going into the cocktail. So that's why I think it's a place where people who know what it takes and people who are kind of unaware, who just want a good drink, they can all be kind of wowed by the execution. So I like that.
And just touching on that, you're so right. But I think what's so cool from our perspective too, being in the industry, is you know when they're doing this, what may seemingly look like showmanship, it's really just execution. That's so cool that it looks like showmanship, but really they're just stirring with two hands for efficiency so that they can make more than one cocktail at the same time.
Right.
They're not actually trying to show off, and it's different than, people who are purposefully flaring, right? I guess we'll call it. And there's nothing wrong with either, but I kind of love that dichotomy. I love the idea that we think they're showing off and they're not.
Right.
And there's something really beautiful about that.
And that does bleed into the service aspect of it, because if somebody stirs or shakes 2 drinks at one time, then you get yours faster.
Exactly.
So I think that's great. And these are the things that we're thinking of. And I'm sure you've got a timer on how long you want a drink to take at your bar. And
of course.
Yeah. So any other memorable things before we move on? Did you?
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think I find so much more pleasure in classic cocktail. I find so much more pleasure by like a perfectly executed old fashioned, or even just like a variation of that, and I get really excited. What's really funny? I get really excited when I receive a cocktail and you can see the oils on the top of the cocktail, because for so many reasons. It means that it was like they actually used the garnish for the purpose of which the garnish is for, which nobody really does that anymore. They're always like doing something super cute, or they're sticking it somewhere. Or it's like, but the whole point is the aromatics of the orange or oils, right? And I did have a cocktail. I don't actually remember where I was, because I'm not gonna lie, this was like 4 bars in. But I remember just like this cocktail coming out, and I could see that little slick, that like oil slick, and I got so excited, and I immediately brought the cocktail to my nose, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's real. This is really happening. That tiny little thing changes the entire cocktail, I don't know. For me, that was everything. Right. It's super silly, but I think it's easy to say like, oh, I had this great cocktail with this peppercorn syrup or this, and it's like, yeah, that's cool. And that's inventive. But I mean, I don't know. I'm such an execution girl. Like, I love perfectly executed things. So
sure.
Yeah.
Well, there's an elegance to it, and I think cocktails should be elegant, and I definitely at the high levels of what we're doing, and pretty much anything, it becomes a game of inches rather than miles. It's not, it's not the big things that you're going to do. It's the small things. Okay, I have one more. My favorite cocktail that I've drank recently was the first cocktail that my bartender put on our menu, because I've been doing them, so it wasn't because I wasn't allowing him to. We just opened, and we went through, we were going through the natural progression of what we're supposed to do. And he came to me and he said, I have this cocktail. And I was like, okay, make it. Let's, and I tasted it, and I was like, oh man, that's delicious, And it's honey, yellow chartreuse, and mezcal. Easy. It's an old fashioned. There's nothing to it. It's, and it's kind of a widow's kissy old fashioned.
It was so good. Just the way he proportions the mezcal with the yellow, because those are both two super, super, over the top flavors. They could both easily overpower each other. And again, I know I'm such a dork about execution, but going back to this, the reason that I liked it so much is because he diluted it more than a normal old fashioned, and it needed that. It needed that because it was so potent, and it was so herbaceous and smoky, and honey too is a very, everything in that cocktail is so crazy aromatic and flavorful. And so when he served it to me, I was like, did you, tell me about your process here, because I'm like, I know what I'm thinking, but I don't want to say it and put it in his head. Right. And he was like, well, I tasted it and I thought this was really good, and I just kept stirring, and then I tasted it again, and I was like, oh, this tastes better, and so he's like, I stirred it a couple more times, and I was like, this is it. I was like, that's amazing. I was like, it's amazing that you came to that on your own, only knowing what I've taught you about dilution, but not saying specifically with mezcal, yellow chartreuse, and honey, you should dilute more than you normally would, right? And so I love watching that process happen.
It sounds, based on the way that you're describing the drink and the process, it seems like it's almost like you put 3 really over the top and not argumentative, but like over the top and overbearing personalities in a room, and you found a perfect mediator to be able to come into that room and make them all sit down and shut up and play nicely together.
Exactly.
And that's a really cool thing. And I think that's part of the craft of bartending that really is impressive, when you can just find somebody who is willing to be experimental enough, but then just use the fundamentals in a way that is innovative. So yeah, that's a really great description of what kind of goes on at some of these the really high end places. What I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to put a pin in something. You talked about dilution a lot, and I had a question about ice. So we're going to get back to dilution, because I know that's like a pet topic of yours, and I think you can probably do a way better job than I can of explaining it. And I want to mention it because we had an episode on ice where I kind of hinted at it, but didn't get into it. But before that, since we're on the topic of Himitsu, can you talk about what your project is now? And I know that there was a trip at some point to a place that might have something to do with it. So if you could maybe tell that narrative. Those are all
true things. Yeah, those are true things. So I, alongside my better half business partner, Kevin Tian, he and I started Himitsu about 11 months ago. And it has just been such a treat and such a delight. And I can't even, I can't talk too much about the process right now, or I'm just going to get emotional. But so he does all the food, I do all the front. So he does all of the or back of house, and I do everything front of house. And so the project is this. It's so funny. People ask me this question, like, how did you, what was your vision, And I think I had a vision and he had a vision, and we talked about our visions, and we were like, well, these are kind of weird together, but I think it's gonna work. I think this is gonna be a very fun project. And so his food is more Southeast Asian, Latin American, very heavily Japanese, a little bit of Korean and Chinese, and there's everything. It's everything that he is and has been to and has traveled and has loved and found passion for. And the front of the beverage program is the exact same thing for me. It's everything that I love and I have seen with my own eyes, and I've traveled, and the biggest thing is made very personal connections with other humans and taken beverages from that. And I mean, super specifically, you'll see a ton of Bolivian influence on my menu. You'll see a ton of Spanish influence on my menu. You'll see a lot of just random cocktails from some of my favorite places that I've ever traveled. And then you'll see you'll see a lot of my personality, I think, in the cocktails. I think they're pretty fun. They're a little esoteric, and they're playful. They're playful. And I think I'm playful. So I think that you really see that in the cocktail menu, and you see that in the wine list too. I mean, the wine list is weird. It's not a normal, I'm not even hating on Chardonnay, but it's a good example. You're not going to really find a Chardonnay from California on my menu unless it's done in some crazy esoteric way and I fell in love with it, right?
Yeah. So
I want people to have two different feelings when they come into Himitsu. I want them to feel like they're living in this weird, they're sitting in this weird house of Kevin and I's, right? That's like you're in our home, right? It should feel less of a place of business and more of a home. It should feel very comfortable. It should feel like you can be yourself. You can dress how you want to dress. All of the sauces are so good, so please pick up the bowl and drink them kind of place, right?
Yes.
And at the same time, I also want you to be comfortable stepping out of your comfort zone, because we're going to do things as a restaurant that maybe a lot of other people aren't doing or haven't done, or, and diners might not be used to. There might be things that we do that are peculiar, and just being open to that and letting that kind of happen while you are there. Because I think if you want to go somewhere for that very regular restaurant experience where you can get, I don't know, a cheeseburger and and a Coca-Cola, right, or a beverage of that sort, like I don't know, even like a Sprite, we'll say something that's like from a tap, right? So one of those fountain taps, like you can do that. You can go there anytime, right? But we're a different experience. We're something that we might not have things. Like we might not have sodas. We might not have coffee service, right? We don't do coffee service. It's like there's these things that maybe diners are used to and we don't do due to us trying to achieve a different style of service. And working within our space limits. I mean, we're 24 seats.
Yeah.
So
small.
There's
Intimate. We'll say intimate.
It's so intimate. It really, truly is so intimate. And I think that's like the third biggest thing about Himitsu is that I love the energy of that place. I mean, it is intimate, and you feel that when you walk in the door. And I've noticed over the past 11 months, if there's one person having a bad day, one diner is like clearly like coming into the restaurant and has had a bad day, like my staff and I do anything to change their day around immediately because it can influence the entire restaurant. It's just like these vibes and this energy that it's hard to not transfer from person to person in such a small place.
Yeah.
You know? And so that's why a huge part of what we do at Himitsu is it's an elevated level of service. It's an elevated experience, but it's personal. And we try to connect with every single person that comes in there. And I think because we're a small restaurant, we can and we should,
right.
You know, and we connect with people, of course, with our food and our beverage, but also with ourselves. Like when I say, you know, we connect with people, I mean that each individual server has a bit of a different style, just like every bartender has a bit of a different style. And I allow them to execute that the way that they want, as long as it fits under the umbrella of our guidelines. And that's, I don't know another restaurant like that, you know, with that much kind of creative freedom of service.
Requires a lot of trust, I think, in your in your mission and in the people that you hire. It
does, and that's why I've always hired based more off of personality, because I can teach skills, but I can't teach you to have a positive outlook on life, you know.
So what I'm hearing is kind of in the same way that you were describing your bartender building that drink, where just a few more stirs had this ripple effect of drastically increasing the quality, where you're kind of saying that because of the intimacy of the space and because of the nature of your program, that, you know, that one person with a bad day can come in and that'll have ripple effects on everything.
100%.
And so I think there's also, what I'm picking up on is a level of sensitivity to things that maybe when you come into your place, you're getting a place that is a little bit more highly attuned to you as a diner or as a person who wants a cocktail.
I think it's important to use the verbiage as a person instead of as a diner, you know? And I think that's the difference. Is if diners could stop seeing the people who are serving them food and beverages as servers, right? And servers could stop seeing the people who are eating the food in their establishment as diners, and we all just saw each other as people, I think there'd be a lot more happiness within restaurants. And
for sure.
I mean, that's a bigger topic,
yeah,
but
that's
you know, that's a huge, but we're trying to do that at Himitsu. At least we're trying to start that trend of just, hey, I'm a person, you're a person. Like sometimes we introduce our names, sometimes we wait until a couple dishes come out to introduce our names. Like we try to really read every single person that comes in and treat them accordingly, right? Treat them the way that I think what they're looking for. What are you looking for when you come in? So we want to give you that. And it's the same thing with cocktails. It's just like full circle, right? It's the same thing as a good bartender is going to read that person before they sit in the stool. And it doesn't mean that you're a psychic and I can say like, oh, hello, you've just sat in my stool. You want a martini?
Martini, 2 olives, shaken, not stirred.
No. It's definitely more energetic than that and less selective of cocktails. But it helps you in guiding them, right? Because then hey, what are you looking for? Cool. You want something boozy, spirit forward, stirred? Or are you looking for something shaken, more refreshing? Cool. Do you like gin? You know, and you can kind of have that conversation in a more natural way.
Right.
and give somebody a drink that they really want.
Yeah.
You know.
So talk to me about Japan.
Oh, well, that was actually before the restaurant. So more recently, I don't know if you know about this trip.
Okay, I
There's
might
another
not.
trip.
So,
Okay.
talk to
So
me about
Japan was great.
Talk to me about international travel and cocktails.
Okay, so Japan was wonderful. Don't ask me the names of the bars that I went to because I'm not going to remember. Actually, I just remember one. Bar Rocking Chair was one that was awesome. So I actually had the opportunity to go with my dad, and it was super fun. We love going on trips together. It honestly was completely unrelated to opening a restaurant that's incredibly Japanese forward.
Right. So
Yeah.
I was kind of misattributing that to having something to do with that trip.
Every single person in my life thought that like I was keeping a secret while I was in Japan and that I was going to. And I wasn't.
It did seem like reconnaissance. In hindsight,
it
seems like reconnaissance.
It seems I think that, it's such a tribute to the way that life works sometimes and how cool it is that happened. But yeah, so I did go to Japan. I got to drink so many cocktails. Oh my goodness. So many good bars at many of the best bars there. Made a lot of cool connections, met some new people, had a blast, ate way too much food. Definitely gained 10 pounds, but it's fine because then I opened a restaurant and lost them. So, but it was phenomenal. And more recently, though, I actually just went to, for the first time in my life, if you can believe it, because you know how much I love sherry. I love sherry so much. I went to Jerez and Sanlúcar de Barrameda and had a blast. Southern Spain, which I have been to in the past, has always been one of my favorites, but I just never... I think I knew in my head I wanted to make a trip of it, and it was always like the last day. I was like, oh, I could spend a day there, but no, I don't want to spend one day there. Right. So I have never been the level of just hospitality everywhere I went was absurd. It was so crazy. It was so perfectly it felt like being in someone's home. Like, we stayed at this wonderful place, and it didn't feel stuffy, even though it was beautiful and grand. It didn't feel stuffy. The woman who owned it was just amazing and was like, this is where you need to go. This is where you need to eat. And she actually we listened to her because I didn't know anything in Jerez at that point. And it turns out it's actually one of like the best restaurants in Jerez, according to not only people who live in Jerez, but also people who live here, and is on all the top charts and stuff. And I just didn't know this. I mean, we were just going, and we had the best meal. It was like amazing. And I got to go to mini bodegas. I did Valdespino, and I did González Valles, and I did Hidalgo La Gitana.
And these are all famous sherry houses, correct?
These are all famous sherry houses, and oh my goodness, is that a treat?
Yeah, I bet.
Meeting some of the producers and meeting some of the managers and the owners and the families. I mean, they're all families, and just meeting the families that make these products that I have fallen in love with was so cool. And I didn't bring any back this time, but I can get most of them here. So that was
nice.
Yeah. So, but it's cool because now I'm selling something too, that I have this opportunity to tell a very personal story to people. And I think that that's such a better way than just saying, this is going to taste like this, this, and this, because we all taste differently. And I think everything is so, not that I don't give tasting notes, because I do, I shouldn't say that, but I think that the story behind it is so much cooler than just telling people what it tastes like. And I also got to go to San Sebastian and meet the guy who makes Gazzaniga, which is a dry Basque cider.
Oh, cool.
It's phenomenal.
And that's on the island of San Sebastian?
It's in oh goodness, I want to say it's further away from Bilbao. It's a little bit west. Okay. And then I got to go meet I got to go to Chocoli. Yeah, and that was super cool too. So
yeah. Spelled with an X, interestingly.
Yes.
Yeah.
That
Basque
TX
spelling.
Basque spelling. Yeah. TX sound.
Yeah.
I love it.
So The one, I don't know if this is even relevant, but with everything that you've been talking about, I recently listened to a podcast where somebody interviewed the founder of LinkedIn interviewed the founder of Airbnb, and he was talking about how the best experiences are based on stories, and the best stories involve a couple things. They involve somebody going somewhere they've never been, so going on a journey, and then they involve being challenged, and then they involve kind of the conquering of that challenge and then personal growth as a result. And everything you've been explaining about the way you've been traveling and the way that you kind of set up your restaurant, it seems like that's kind of, the Airbnb guy said that's how he sets up his new trip planning services. He takes people and he wants to challenge them, which it seems like you kind of want to give people a little bit of a different, there's a little bit of uncomfortableness if you're coming in expecting coffee, but it's not there. Right.
100%. Yes.
And so there's that challenge. And then, but there's also a really famous tradition, at least in Western literature, of the guide, right? That's kind of a trope. It was Dante was guided by Virgil through the Inferno. And so it seems like, at least in your place, you have this setup where you've set up these narratives with the menu and the experience, and even the staff that you've surrounded yourself with, where when people come into your establishment, they get the challenge, they have a good guide who they can trust and who treats them as a person, as opposed to just kind of a number. And hopefully, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but I don't think I am. Hopefully, by the end of the experience, they've overcome some challenge, in maybe experienced something new, and they feel that they've grown or had some sort of life-changing experience as a result.
No, I think you're completely accurate, and I think I've seen that in my guests, in the people that have come to the restaurant, who maybe did start the night a little kind of weirded out, like, oh, we thought this was, a lot of people come thinking that it's a sushi restaurant, and we get that a lot, and I think, it's not really the people, it's not their fault. It's, if you look online and if you look at Yelp specifically, we're under the sushi restaurants, and there's nothing we can do about that because we definitely serve raw fish. But so I would say that's the most uncomfortable thing right now, that people don't know what to do with the hot dishes on our menu or the snacks. And it doesn't happen often now. I think it happened a lot more in the beginning. But the people who stay and commit to the experience leave, and they're like, this is so much better than I thought, than any sushi restaurant I've ever been to, even, and I'm like, cool. So you get it. You have to kind of, you have to let go a little bit. But if you do let go with us, I can promise that we're going to do our best to make you feel very comfortable and happy and full and a little drunk.
Yeah. Well, I think you just summed it up really well. So before we jump into our lightning round questions here, ice and dilution, go.
All right. Everybody makes me do this. I
really?
love ice.
Everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because I love ice and I get it. So ice and dilution. Okay. So I think by now, many people who are even in the beginning of making cocktails probably understand the difference of smaller ice melting faster and larger ice melting slower. And why is that important, right? So in a cocktail, we are always looking to achieve balance. And I mean that in every aspect. We don't want something that's too boozy or too sweet or too sour or too bitter, or, I think most importantly, too diluted or not diluted enough. And nobody really talks about dilution enough, right? I think they all want to talk about when most people say balance, they mean the sour versus the sweet versus the booze.
Right. Taste bud stuff.
Totally. Yeah. But none of that even matters if you're not diluting properly, because think about sipping whiskey. When you put a couple drops of water into it, and how it opens up, completely changes the aromatics and the flavor profiles. Mm-hmm. And it allows you to taste things that you wouldn't taste without it. And that's exactly what's happening in the cocktail. Going back to that conversation of balance, the other thing we have to balance is dilution versus, my term for it, I totally made this up, is chill factor. So dilution versus chill factor. And how do you dilute a cocktail? And I think the old fashioned is a really good example of this. Or using the old fashioned versus the Manhattan is a good example in this.
Okay.
How do you chill a cocktail to the proper degree, we'll call it, and at the same time dilute the cocktail properly? And so, it gets even more complicated when we're talking about service too, because if something's going to be sitting for 20 seconds and then taken to a table that's a 20-second walk away, that's another, almost a minute of more diluting that you have no control over. So the best thing you can do as a bartender is learn to have the most control over every aspect you can, because once it leaves your hands, you have no more control.
That's it.
And so the larger piece of ice that we can use, the slower we're going to dilute, the more control we have over the product, over the final product. So I always prefer stirring on large clear rocks, right? And arguably you could use, well, not even arguably, if you're at home, I would definitely not use a clear rock because they're really expensive. So, but there's ways to get around this, right? So like when we're talking about the actual piece of ice itself, the best ice you can use is large and it has no air inside of it. And if it has no air inside of it, it's also going to melt slower.
Right.
If it has air inside of it, there's more surface area, more things that can touch the ice and melt it faster.
And for people at home, air basically means the white stuff in the ice, right?
Yes. Air means that cloudiness of the ice. In a restaurant setting, we have the ability to get these huge, large blocks of ice in and cut them down into cubes, into squares, that's the same thing, and rectangles and all these different shapes. And so we do. So for me, stirring on that large, clear cube, I know I'm in control of that cocktail. I know I have the most control, and I can take my time building my shaken cocktails while the rock is sitting there slowly diluting that cocktail. And then I'll give it a couple stirs, and I know that it's getting very cold very fast and diluting very slow. So that's important. And I think cocktails should be diluted from 20 to 30% of the entire cocktail, right? So if you have a 3-ounce cocktail, you want about an ounce of water in there.
Cool. That's a good rule. Just good rule to go by.
It's a good rule of thumb. It's not always, it's cocktails. Nothing's always accurate always.
Yeah.
So, but it's cocktails. So for me, in an old fashioned, right, you're looking at about 3 ounces, at least for me. You want about an ounce of water in there. And it's a game changer. If people are having trouble imagining this, I would say make a cocktail with no ice, make an old fashioned with no ice, and stick it in the freezer. And take it out 2 hours later and make the same cocktail and dilute it, with the ice, and taste them side by side.
Right.
I mean, it's not even comparable.
Yeah, it's basically like whiskey that sugar did not dissolve in, and then an old fashioned.
It's like sweet whiskey and a cocktail.
Yeah.
2 different things. So, and so just to touch on one more thing the geekiness in me that I love. So the difference between the old fashioned and the Manhattan, right? So that the old fashioned, I would argue, in a service atmosphere, you want to under dilute it like that at 5%. Because the ice is in the cocktail, it's going to continue to melt, and you don't want to serve something that's watery either. And by the time that the cocktail is made and sits there and goes, and here's the big kicker, the service isn't even really the factor. Most people, I don't know, this is like not true for me at all, but I've noticed this, again, more as an owner and like watching the whole restaurant than I ever did as a bartender. Most people do not pick up their drink for minutes and to take that first sip.
That's not me.
Because they're that's not me either, but pay attention next time you're out, because a lot of times people are in mid conversations, and so they'll just sit here and now their hand is touching the drink. And if you have a rocks glass, their hand is warming up the cocktail and they're just sitting there. So again, this is why you read your guest. Are they going to take that first sip? Are they going to, and you dilute accordingly. And it sounds like a lot of work, but it's not. It's not when everything else is just intuition at that point.
That's such a
So-
weird thing to profile someone for. You're looking at some
Well,
guy and you're
if
like,
someone's
this
really
is a
talking-
hand on the old-fashioned guy.
Sure,
Yeah.
but I mean, look how they're holding their water glass. Are they holding their water glass from the top? Or are they holding it from the side? Are they really in depth of a conversation with somebody? Or are they making out with somebody at the bar? They're probably not drinking that drink for till they're done making out, like 3-5 minutes later. So they're silly things, but that's what I think about, and that's why I will dilute to either 20 or 25 or 30% accordingly. Whereas then you have the Manhattan. It's in a coupe. It's served up. Most people are not putting their hands on it, actually, especially these days, which I'm really proud of. They're normally holding it by the stem. And it's not going to dilute any more than what you have diluted it to.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, you cannot under-dilute that.
Yeah.
Because then you're just sending out sweet whiskey.
Yep.
Right?
And you do you chill your coupe glasses?
Definitely.
Yes.
Yes.
That's something for folks at home. Some of these things are just a little bit difficult to navigate in a home atmosphere, like chilling glasses ahead of time. But there are ways to do it, right?
There are ways to do it. And one of the best things I ever learned from somebody is they told me, we bartend to the best of our surroundings. You must bartend to the best of your surroundings, I think he said, which meant that sometimes you're gonna be in a place, and like Himitsu, I'll even share this. Like at Himitsu, there is not room to chill every type of glassware. So we prioritize, we bartend to the best of our surroundings. We prioritize coupes, and we prioritize, I think rocks are in there as well. Because again, with the hand, it freaks me out.
Again with the hand.
We don't prioritize highballs, and I'll get to that because I know that people could argue that you're definitely holding that highball with your hand.
Sure.
But we'll get to that in just a second. And there's no room for those, so I put them on a shelf. And I guess I don't have to wait that long to get back to that. The reason is it's a highball. It's a refreshing, it's typically citrusy, easy to drink cocktail, and it's not what I think a lot of people consider the other. So there's like sippers, right? Sippers.
Mm-hmm.
We call them boozy spirit stirred cocktails. Most people call them sippers. But something served in a highball is typically going to be drank much faster.
And occasionally there's going to be some ingredients in there that are refrigerated as well. So they're going to be going in at a cooler temperature than, say, your whiskey.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, that's how I am able to compartmentalize my not being able to chill every glassware at Himitsu. But, we're tiny. We are less than 1,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And there are other things that need prioritizing than chilling our highballs. And I have to just move on with my life about that. And I have.
Well, and when you break down all this stuff about ice and all this hyper technical stuff, I mean, it seems like at the heart of it, you have the human element in the forefront of your mind. And my reaction to all the stuff that you're saying is that it's a bit absurd, admittedly, that
Totally.
you are profiling people based on what they're going to be, how they're going to be touching their drink. On the other hand, I think what that speaks to is how just kind and intimate that is. So I think I'll leave it at that. I think that's some great feedback about dilution. And folks, if you're interested in learning more about kind of the technical, more chemical sides of ice and stuff like that, check out our Modern Bar Cart Foundations episode, Guide to Ice, whatever. Just find the ice episode and you'll have more there. So I want to jump in because I know that you're getting ready for service soon. So I want to jump into the lightning round questions and
Sure.
we can keep these brief. You're a bartender. You've been doing this for a while. You're going to be tempted to overthink some of these. Don't overthink them.
Will not overthink.
Cool.
No promises, though.
All right, we'll start with this. What's your favorite cocktail? And if you can't pick a favorite cocktail of all time, what is a cocktail that you've recently been obsessed with?
Okay, can't answer this question without just saying my favorite cocktail depends on my mood in this seasons, but that's all I'll say.
Okay.
So I'm going to pick this mood in this season.
Great.
I'm incredibly happy, and it's beautiful out. And right now, I would drink a chuflai, which is the national drink of Bolivia with Singani, lime, and ginger.
Spell that.
Well, there's two spellings. There's CHUFLY and there's CHUFLAY.
It's like shoe fly or
Yeah,
souffle.
chuflai.
Souffle?
I think it's chuflai.
You should
either
pair
way.
that with
I
a
think the
souffle on your
pronunciation
menu.
is. I'm pretty chuflai. Chuflai. It's like a chew.
Yeah.
Chuflai.
And what Singani, can you just describe the flavor profile of that?
Absolutely. Singani, I love Singani for the fact that so the grapes are grown at a higher altitude. And what that does to the actual final product is it gives them these incredible floral notes. So it has some notes of tequila, some notes of like a pisco, and the overwhelming flavor to me is just like this crisp, almost citrusy, floral, unaged brandy.
Okay, so it's a brandy, which is it's grape based, and what proof or percentage is that usually weighing in at?
I think 45.
Gotcha. Yeah, don't know.
Don't
Honestly, a question. And Modern Bar Cart does not have any spirit sponsors, so feel free to drop spirit names. We're equal opportunity.
Okay, perfect. I love Rujero Singani. It's my favorite. You can see, like, I use it in all my cocktails at Himitsu, but honestly, any Singani that's being drank in America to me is cool.
Awesome. Next question. What is your favorite spirit, if you had to pick one, desert island situation, and what do you like about it?
Okay, well, I'm not going to say Singani, even though it would be, because I just talked about that. So let me pick my second favorite spirit, tequila.
Cool.
I love tequila so much. I think I love any agave-based spirits, so mezcal as well, so tall even. But tequila for me and mezcal. Can I just say agave spirits, or do I have to really?
Agave spirits.
I'm saying
is fine.
agave spirits. I'm bringing 3 bottles because I can fit them in my one bag.
I mean,
in a deserted island.
Maybe you would make these. Maybe your deserted island has a lot of agave.
Maybe there's lots of agave, and I can
build
a hole in the ground and smoke some piñas. Yeah, make some mezcal. And they're my favorite because I don't know flavor. I don't know. I don't know why I like things that I like, but I like them a lot.
If you could have a cocktail with anyone in the world, past or present, who would it be? Where would you go? What would you drink? And what would you talk about?
What? I don't even know.
We
That's
can circle
crazy.
back to this. Yeah,
Edith
we can circle
Piaf.
back to this one. Edith Piaf. Great.
There's probably I could probably name 100 people right now, right? I'm just gonna say Edith Piaf, classic 50-50 martini, piano bar, Europe.
Europe.
Somewhere Europe.
What would you talk about?
Her life. I just think it's fascinating.
Nice.
Yeah.
And who is she? Just large picture context. What was she notable for?
She's a singer.
She's a singer.
Yeah.
Great.
Look her up if you don't know her. She's amazing.
Jazz singer. Yeah.
Jazzy.
Cool. Are there any books about cocktails that have been particularly influential or enjoyable for you?
Oh,
even recently, if you're a big reader.
I would say if you can pick up any book by Sasha Prochaska, that's going to be a really good place to start these days.
Okay. If you could give any piece of advice to someone who's just starting to learn about or experiment with cocktails, what advice would that be for like a home bartender?
Okay, this one's real. Don't just throw things together and think that you're a bartender. Learn the basics as anything. Like this is like with anything, right? But really learn the basics. Learn technique, learn how to measure every time. You should never feel comfortable enough as a bartender to not measure, in fact, in my opinion, my humble opinion. And, listen to others, but find your own style, because you shouldn't just be emulating anybody else's style, because that's their style.
Yeah. And
you got to do you.
Yeah, you got to do you. And hopefully we can help people kind of find their own styles. I think this podcast episode is a really great template for folks who are at home listening, just to follow the journey of someone who started at age 15 in getting paid under the table in a family friend's restaurant and worked her way up to finding a style that is so unique that you're now winning awards, major awards and recognitions for for a restaurant that has only been open for, like you said, 11 months. So I would say that is its own unique style, and I'm really glad to have just gotten this time to talk to you. But I know that you've got to get ready for service, so I'm going to end by saying, is there any way that our listeners could get in touch with you if they want to either
of course,
check it out or follow you on social? So
definitely follow on social, and the 2 handlers would be at Himitsu DC, which is HIMITSUDC. And my personal, which you're also welcome to follow, is at Kissandrink, which is KISSANDDRINK. Super easy, right? And I email would be a really appropriate way to reach out for any follow-up questions. And that's going to be Carlie, CARLIE, at HimitsuDC.com.
Carlie, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank
It was
you.
amazing. Hey everybody, thanks for listening. I just want to remind you that this episode might be over, but the journey and the discussion are just beginning. If you're excited about the content in this or any other episode, please tell us. Follow us on Instagram at Modern Bar Cart for recipes and great product tips, or stalk me personally at Quixologist. That's QUIX-ologist. You can also like us on Facebook by searching Modern Bar Cart, or hit us up directly via email by sending a note to podcast@modernbarcart.com. That email address, by the way, is also the one that you should use if you've got any cocktail or home bartending related questions you'd like us to address, or if you think you have a unique perspective on the cocktail world and would like to be interviewed for all to hear. I'll see you next time, but until then, drink responsibly and experiment boldly.